Welcome everyone to A Beautiful Stillness. Artists Mariam Ghani, Erin Ellen Kelly, Molteni and Cauleen Smith in conversation. I'm Mathilde Walker-Bio and I'm creator of programming at the American Folk Art Museum. And I'm joining you today from Queens, New York, and I want to acknowledge that our museum stands upon Lenape-Hocking, the unceded traditional homeland of the Lenape Delaware peoples. We honor Lenape people, past, present, and future, and are committed to centering Indigenous perspectives in exhibitions and programs at the museum. A quick note that closed captioning in English is available today by clicking on the CC button at the bottom of your screen. Next slide. Today's conversation is convened in response to Anything But Simple, gift drawing and the shaker aesthetic, an exhibition now on view at the American Folk Art Museum until January 26, along with Playing with Design, game boards, art and culture, and the collection-based exhibition Somewhere to Roost. Anything But Simple, gift drawings and the shaker aesthetic features fine examples of shaker gift drawings lent by Hancock Shaker Village, situated in Massachusetts, and which originated the exhibition. It also includes shaker clothing, furniture, and archival materials from AFAM's holdings, as well as public and private collections. Shaker gift drawings are spirit works made on paper in the mid-19th centuries during the era of manifestations, an extraordinary time in shaker history when art and music flourished and faith was renewed. During this time, shakers believed that spirits visited instruments, mediums, mainly women, who were able to receive gifts from above. And these supernatural communications were recorded in the form of text, songs, and drawings. The title of the program, A Beautiful Stillness, is excerpted from a diary kept in the archives of Pleasant Hill Shaker Village, located in Kentucky, and it describes a moment of quietness prior to religious service in the meeting hall where Shaker worshippers gathered to dance and sing. I came across this note while reading Mariam Ghani and Erin Ellen Kelly's introduction to their project, When the Spirits Moved Them, They Moved. And I believe it captures the shaker's contemplative views and sense of daily time. And as some of you may know, shakers made no distinction between spiritual and secular life. So shaker gift drawings are mysterious, and how they were used by the community is still not entirely clear today. What we know is that these drawings were part of a continuum with other manifestations of belief, such as praying, singing, dancing, writing, and other forms of labor like craft making and cleaning. So part of the excitement of bringing together Mariam Ghani and Erin Ellen Kelly, as well as the artists Molteni and Cauleen Smith, is considering the gift drawings within their context of production as integral parts of a larger communal and spiritual practice. So hearing from these four artists who researched and activated the gift drawings in their performance and media projects is getting an opportunity to touch upon the complexity of these materials categorized as either folk art, women's work, or spiritual automatism. And to explore also why these recordings made over a century ago in a religious context are still appealing to us today. So before I give the stage to our speakers, let me first go through a few technicalities with you all. The program will last for about an hour and a half, and we'll start with artist presentations, followed by a conversation with everyone, moderated by Julie Schneider. There will be time for Q&A after the conversation, so please share your question in the Q&A throughout the talk, and there is a Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. I'll be also using the chat to share more details about the speakers, their work, and the program. And if you need any additional information, drop me a line. And please note that today's program is being recorded and will be made available online in the coming weeks. And again, closed captioning in English is available by clicking on the CC button at the bottom of your screen. Our museum is grateful for opportunities like this program to connect online, which will not be possible without you. So I hope you will consider supporting our programs through a donation after the conversation. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for this conversation, Julie Schneider. Hi, Julie. Thank you for being here. As a writer, editor, and photographer, Julie Schneider produces stories about arts and culture, health and science, and the weird and the wonderful. She's a regular contributor to Hyperallergic, and her work has appeared in the Center magazine, Taproot magazine, the Etsy journal, and elsewhere. And please welcome Julie. And Julie, hi, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Mathilde. As mentioned, I'm Julie. I'm a regular reviewer and writer for Hyperallergic. I'm based in Brooklyn, New York, and I'll be your guide through today's event. And to everyone tuning in this evening, thank you. Thank you for being here. And I've got to say, I think you've made an excellent choice carving out some time to be here tonight during this busy stretch of the year. I feel like this is a good moment to find some beautiful stillness, to pause, to reflect, and to explore the beautiful, mysterious, mystical worlds of Shaker gift drawings and the contemporary art that they've inspired. And we've truly got an incredible group of artists here tonight, so I think we're all in for a treat. I'm honored to be among them. And so thank you all for being here. And also for those watching later, a special hello for you as well. So without further ado, we'll get things rolling. First up, we'll have Maria Molteni. Maria is a Massachusetts-based interdisciplinary artist, educator, mystic, and independent Shaker researcher of 17 years, ever since their first visit to the Living Shakers in 2007. They've exhibited at numerous galleries and museums, including the St. Louis Obispo Museum of Art in California, the ICA and MFA Boston, Den Free Contemporary Art Center in Copenhagen, NGBK in Berlin, and the Museum of Design in Atlanta. So now I'll hand it over to you, Maria. Take it away.
There. I'm just going to make sure that I shouldn't turn my screen off. But if something starts getting choppy, Matilda will let me know. Thanks so much. There's a lot of stillness in my film, but this my 10-minute talk is going to go pretty quick. So my name is Maria Molteni. I use they, them pronouns. I'm an interdisciplinary artist, mystic, educator, and independent researcher with formal training in painting, printmaking, dance, and athletics. My intuitive practice, so next slide, has spanned tarot, astrology, color magic, mediumship, dream work, and somatic spellcraft. I'm perhaps most known for creating psychically and physically labor-intensive site-specific works on the ground, sometimes on basketball courts. Slide. Engaging community and collaboration, called a social practice artist, but I think of what I do as social magic. I believe my groundworks to be design assignments from above that I am tasked with giving shape to. Slide. And one more slide. They're also vehicles for my research. I refer to these works as altars to the sky, shape-shifting labyrinths, and anti or horizontal monuments, which I then activate through movement, ritual, and film. Slide. But I also have a studio practice and show my work in traditional gallery spaces. One more slide. Spirit communication, embodied mysticism, matriarchal societies and mythologies, as well as gender expansive expressions of the divine are all central to my work. Slide. I sometimes playfully refer as a metaphysical education coach for visionary movements like Black Mountain College, Bauhaus, or the Shakers. You can go to the next couple slides. We're not going to talk today about my shaker workout video series, but that connects to the sort of phys ed coach slide. I currently live on Wampanoag, Nipmuc, Massachusetts land, but I'm originally from Tennessee. My grand and great grandparents, who were rural Tennessee farmers, quilters, beekeepers, and competitive square dancers, worked the land just 30 from one of the southernmost Shaker villages, slide, South Union in Kentucky. I've been studying the Shakers for nearly 20 years. However, my introduction to them was not in Kentucky, but Maine, when I visited Sister June, Brother Arnold, Sister Frances at Sabbath Day Lake Shaker Village in 2007. Sister Frances gifted me a copy of her memoir, my first piece of Shaker literature. Slide. For the first 10 to 15 years of my Shaker journey, I quietly attended their open services as well as other villages, collected and read Shaker books, sometimes used their song and dance in my own lesson plans and programs with youth. I was drawn to their embodied spiritual practices, free-form and shaped dancing, ritualized labor, their ability to imbue the material world with a divine vision, and of course, the gift drawings. Slide. I was quite shy. At first, I was quite shy about making artwork about them, partially because I have a deep respect for their privacy and also their agency, as I recognize the complexities of their very public influence with just 2 remaining Shakers to manage. For 2 years, I was on a waiting list to attend Sister June's Intimate Shaker Sisters Retreat, but it was canceled during COVID and sadly never rescheduled. Around that time, Shakers entered one of their many moments of heightened public celebration, which brought about opportunities to exhibit and publish my writing. I figured it was time to step out of the broom closet. Next slide. It's important to remember that Shakers do still exist and speak to their own practices. My current research comes from a place of respectful scholarship, but my opinions, conceptual frameworks, and analyses are. While I often position my work as inspired by Shaker experience, I do not consider it a reenactment or role playing. Slide. As a queer person practicing spiritualist and beekeeper, you'll also see that I often speak to the overlaps between queerness, mediumship, apiculture, and studies with a focus on the Shaker era of manifestations, which Mathilde told you, or actually which predated the commonly accepted birth of American spiritualism by about a decade. Slide. Most of the slides here come from a longer lecture I give about the era of manifestations, others' work, a time of heightened visionary receptivity and trance experiences, a period during which the gift drawings were produced. Invitations to present my Shaker work publicly arrived between 2018 and 2019 by Shana Dumont-Gar at Fruitlands Museum, which is in the vicinity of Harvard and Shirley historic Shaker villages, and Sarah Margolis Pineo at Hancock Shaker Village. Slide. I was cooking up a multi-sided project and programming series that would also incorporate Mount or New Lebanon. There's certainly a long and pretty mind-blowing version of this story upon in my writing, but we've only got 10 minutes, so these are the cliff notes. At Hancock, I was designing immersive structures and experiences through the lenses of channeled creative receptivity and pilgrimage. Sadly, this project was canceled during COVID. Next slide. By my collaborator, Melissa of Now Age Travel, and I revived it as a DIY pilgrimage from Salem, Massachusetts, aka Witch City, to Lilydale, New York, aka the town that talks to the dead. In 2023, Great Awakenings, Radical Road Trip Seeks Heaven on Earth, next slide, carried 5 queer through historic spiritualist, Shaker, and abolitionist sites relevant to periods of American history called Great Awakenings. One of our stops was in the Hancock archives for private viewings of the gift drawings. Here we absorb their messages with all three of our eyes, our hands, and our hearts. Big shout out to Emily, by the way, who I've been working with in those archives for a while. Next slide. Here you can see us looking closely at some of the work currently on view at AFAM. Next slide. But stepping back to 2020, I was able to use my research in the Hancock archives to flesh out a new direction. Fruitlands Museum historic Shaker office building. Pre-COVID, I'd been planning to build a massive observation leaf hive into the attic of this building. Slide. A book-shaped beehive that 19th century blind beekeeper Francis Hubert designed. Here, I'm sure would say that better than me. Here one could turn the pages of the leaf hive and observe honeybee sisters laboring and dancing about, not unlike Shakers. An excerpt from my essay, Dance to the Fountain, about these parallels. Next slide. Both Shaker and honeybee society are efficient, strictly organized, labor-intensive communal colonies. Today, they're known for living in tidy, symmetrical white boxes, next slide, that they work tirelessly to maintain, delegating teams to specialized tasks. They're each a body, sometimes called superorganism, composed of dominantly female, sexually inactive individuals that gather around a queen or exceptional mother figure. This queen mother is not an absolute monarchic ruler, but the select provider of an essence that is passed around the group. Next slide. Her pheromones, her messages are spread cooperatively through the community and maintain stability and purpose. They thrive doing mother's work. They may be viewed as queer, not by their own proclamation, but by defying dominant cultural standards of sexual behavior, partnership, family, societal structure. They have been described as embodying the androgynous ideal. Despite being or exclusively celibate, they are present in their bodies. Honeybees and Shakers, they labor for life, work themselves till death, they dance themselves dizzy. They shake and tremble, waggle and fly to highest elevations, charged by assignments from their matriarch. They engage in highly intelligent modes of communication that exist on planes, perceiving what most human eyes cannot. Honeybees see ultraviolet wavelengths on the electromagnetic spectrum. Next slide. Shaker instruments sense more ethereal frequencies delivered from spirit as psychic messaging. Bees draw with their bodies in the darkness of hive boxes. Shakers, when cloaked in trance, gaze through the veil via spiritual spectacles. Other societies look to them both as beacons of light, models for utopia, guidance for saving humanity or the planet, all while spreading alarmist rhetoric that each is endangered. Next slide. Sadly, COVID also shut the book on the indoor leaf hive installation, but I decided to transmute this work into new form, a film project focused on my favorite series of gift drawings, The Sacred Sheets. For this, I called on, next slide, Allison Halter, a fellow broom maker, performance and video artist, and Gabe Elder, an excellent cinematographer. On a shoestring budget, a crew of exactly 3, and with only 2.5 days to shoot, we made magic. Some Shaker historians place the gift drawings in 3 loose categories. Next slide. Cutouts, such as the Celestial Valentines, and leaf drawings. So the next 2 slides will show you that, which are considered in the line of writing. And then there's that's a leaf drawing, and then next is a Celestial Valentine. We were talking about the 3 kinds of gift drawings, and the 3rd kind is the sacred sheets. The sacred sheets are unique in that they sort of bridge the first 2 kinds with calligraphic shapes that come together almost like an alphabetical spirit writing laid into diagrammatic pictorial arrangements. Naturally, I can't unsee the basketball courts and square dances embedded in them. And while most of the gift drawings involve more than one artist, often a visionist or medium, instrument, or recorder, the sacred sheets are attributed to 2 women, Samantha Fairbanks and Mary Wicks. Allison and I collaborated on many handmade objects to combine with artifacts from Hancock and Fruitland's collections to include in our film. This included hand-dyed garments, Shaker-style brooms, and a recreation of one of my favorite Sacred Sheets drawings. For this, we painted paper with milk paint I made from scratch and cut them into the calligraphic shapes we found in the drawing. We arranged them on the floor and designed broom choreography that combined both Shaker and dancing patterns. One of the reasons I chose this drawing in particular is that it mirrors the figure 8 pattern of the iconic honeybee waggle dance. Via the waggle and tremble dances, bees draw maps with their bodies, communicating direction and location related to angles of the sun, so that jurors can make their own ways to sources of flowing golden nectar. The sun shape in the Shaker drawing mirrors this cosmic wisdom of inner and outer knowing beautifully. As for the X, which you can almost see in the part of the video. As for the X, it may be perceived a connection to the X's that the Shakers placed outside their meeting houses during the era of manifestations. This period of heightened spirit communication and uncontrollable trance posed a public relations crisis for the Shakers. Thus, they opted to shut the public world out entirely during this time. Since we were filming during COVID, we viewed the X as the world under lockdown. While devastating for all humans, this time also shined light on so many hidden systems of power and liberation. Side note, our had been rescheduled 3 times, and we ended up shooting on an eerily gorgeous election weekend in November. We found out that Biden had taken the presidency just as we finished filming. One final excerpt from my essay, Dance to the Fountain, which appears in our publication, Unseen Hours, Space Clearing for Spirit Work, unpacks some of the cosmic parallels. In the Shaker office, we prepared a space for reviewing and transcribing elusive sacred. The use of space clearing ritual via handcrafted vibrations of voice, bells, sweeping, smoke, and color was not to exterminate ghosts or pardon harms or claim territory. We aimed to refresh and reset, calling back spirits for co-laboring. We aimed and present for what might arrive, a state perhaps better described as space holding. This is the last bit here. Of all the sacred sheets compositions, we chose to awaken the astral infinity that resembles the figure 8 danced by honeybees. On one side, a heaven, the center of our solar system, by which we see a waking world of refracted light. On the other side, an X, marking treasures found in brooding subterranean darkness. The fertile shadows we've so feared. We trace these looping patterns with brooms like brushstrokes, underlining the cyclical rise and fall of power alongside Pluto, the moon, and sun. We underline the infinite relationship between the earth and its people and their gods, the land and the sky. We aim to stir up and call in a balance between light and dark, action and reflection, birth and destruction, the seen and unseen. Thank you so much. It takes a village, group effort. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you everyone for pitching in and making it happen. I can tell we're among some creative problem solvers. Okay, so next up, we will we'll be hearing from Mariam and Erin. Mariam, are you able to share the slides for this one too, or
Yes, I have our own
have your own?
slideshow,
Okay.
and then and I don't know if Colleen has her
Will you
own
be,
as well. Yeah,
you'll be
so
able to
yeah,
okay, just wanted to
yeah.
see what our game
So
plan was. And then
yeah, I
I
can
don't
probably eventually pull up the full one as well, but that would take me a little bit longer. So maybe I can do it while Colleen is doing is doing her talk. So I think the fastest thing right now is to just share from my own.
share. Okay, yeah, we can.
Yeah.
If you're
Yeah.
ready to share yours, that's great. And then I don't know, whoever's host, if you want to, if there's a way to turn on my video, feel free. Otherwise, I'll proceed just with my voice from beyond.
I will look.
It's fine. I'll just start talking if you figured out. I don't think we
Okay.
need to. It's not essential to this moment. So,
Hi,
all
I'm
right.
actually back. I went on
Oh,
my
you're back.
hotspot.
Okay, great.
Oh,
You're back. Great.
sorry about that.
Mhm.
Okay. How do you best recommend we proceed, Richard?
I think Erin's host now. Can you make me a co-host?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know how to do all of that. So if you
If you go into participants and just go by my name and click more, there should be an option to make me a co-host.
By the way, Julie is recording now, and we managed to just finish my
Thank you
talk.
so much.
It went well, so don't worry.
You're a co-host now, Richard.
Thank you.
Thanks to Mariam.
Much appreciated. I'm not sure what happened with the internet here, just completely conked out. I'm going to start the slideshow up to Miriam's.
And Richard, I think Julie's video has been turned off and she needs it turned back on.
Okay.
So yeah, when I try to press it, it says host has turned off your video.
Can you start now?
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And you're gonna start share the slides, Richard? Is that?
Yeah, I'm going to start sharing in just a minute.
Okay, yeah, great. Thanks everyone for your teamwork here. Zoom internet keeping us on our toes. All right, we're back to our regularly scheduled programming here. Thank you, Maria, and everyone for the teamwork. All right, so next up we have longtime collaborators Mariam Ghani and Erin Ellen Kelly. Mariam Ghani is an artist, writer, and filmmaker. Her work operates at the intersections of language, loss, migration, memory, and history. Her films, public projects, photographs, and installations have been presented and collected worldwide, notably at the Guggenheim, New Museum, MoMA, Smithsonian, and Metropolitan Museums. Documenta 13 and Sharjah Biennials. Museum solo shows include the St. Louis Art Museum and the Queen's Museum of Art. And Erin Ellen Kelly creates and choreographs for on-site presentation, the stage, installations, video, and photographs, and presents in varied locations within natural, liminal, and constructed environments. She has presented works in various contexts and through the support of institutions and festivals that include the Smithsonian American Art Museum, Serpentine's Lacquer Gallery, the Speed Museum, the Bass Museum's Temporary Contemporary Series, Sharjah Biennial 9, Indianapolis Museum of Art, and the Queen's Museum. I'll let you take it away, Mariam and Erin.
Thank you, Julie, and thanks to everyone for being with us today virtually and bearing with us through the technological pains of Zoom. And I'm Mariam Ghani.
And I'm Erin Ellen Kelly, and we're going to present our 2018 project, When the Spirits Moved Them, They Moved.
Okay, next slide, please. So this, as Julie mentioned, Erin and I have been collaborating for quite a long time, since 2006. And this is, I think, our second to last project that we worked on together. This was shot in 2018 at the Shaker Village in Pleasant Hill, Kentucky. It's a 3-channel 4K installation, and it condenses a day-long durational performance that we made together with dancers from Louisville and Lexington, Kentucky, into a 22-minute meditation on Shaker landscapes, architecture, song, and dance as ways of organizing being in common. So we'll start just by playing you a short excerpt. Next slide, please. Is there sound? Did you not share the sound?
We tested it. I know we tested it in
Yeah.
the pre.
Hi, I'm trying to get the sound working, so I'm going to reshare the screen.
Okay. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so yeah, lots of things to unpack there. We worked with a series of texts from diaries in the Shaker Village archives as part of the research process. And I think Mathilde mentioned this earlier. We always present an adapted and condensed version as introductory text whenever the video is shown. We're going to read some excerpts from that as we go on here. And I'm just going to start with this first bit that actually references the beautiful stillness. So on Mother Anne's birthday, the whole society met at the meeting house to celebrate the day. Like all Sabbaths in Shaker villages, a beautiful stillness pervaded. After the body of worshippers gathered into order, we commenced the services by one bow and opened the meeting by singing a hymn. All that were able united into ranks to step for the first song, then formed two circles for the march. Next slide, please. At this time in a meeting, it was usual to step quick and lively for two songs, sing two songs for the slow march, then two for the round dance with the circle unbroken. On this occasion, the house was too crowded to march with convenience, so the dancing commenced in a promiscuous manner by the middle and young classes and was attended with great power. The seats had to be taken out of the room to give place for the spirits to sing and dance, and the gifts and blessings of heaven were poured forth by the heavenly orders in great abundance. Erin, please take it away.
Okay, should we go to the next slide?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So like Maria, we weren't interested in necessarily doing a recreation of like at the village, if you go, they'll do a reenactment of the dance and process. And I was much more interested when we were doing our research, this drawing got my attention. And then it's very similar in physicality to like a Qigong form that I study. And so I was really interested in referencing how different spiritual practices can inform movement and then the descriptions from the diary entries. So that's kind of the starting point, and how through duration and repetition, it could be a vehicle for transformative states. Like Mariam said, I think I will correct, it was 2017, so it was right after the first Trump election that we went down to Kentucky, and we were interested in how do we like kind of find community through performers, and the idea of like wanting to work with people that might not have a movement background, and how do we do that? And that kind of was a long, arduous process. And we ended up working with mostly performers at the end of the day. And they were great. And they went on a wild journey. And we started at 7 in the morning and concluded at 7 in the evening.
Yeah, so this particular meeting house at Pleasant Hill once hosted a 19-hour-long meeting. Which is one of the reasons we were interested in this meeting house in particular, and also one of the reasons that they were open to hosting a durational performance that would be 12 hours long, because it spoke to the history of this particular place. Next slide, please. The 3-channel video is organized in this particular way, so that basically it evokes the kind of way of life of the Shakers through their enduring physical sites, and the outer channels are mirrored. They focus on the pathways, the fences, and the walls that circumscribed Shaker life within highly ordered patterns of movement and rituals of faith. You know, walking the paths was part of the daily practice of faith. But the center channel takes place mostly in the meeting house. And the meeting house, of course, in these weekly meetings, the closed community opens up to the world outside, right? And during this period of Mother Anne's revival that we're all kind of referencing in our works, it also opens up to the chaos of ecstatic vision. So you have this order in the outer channels, which is enclosing this beautiful opening to chaos in the center. And that chaos then materializes as the gifts of songs, the gifts of dances, and the gifts of drawings. One of the things that interested us in the gift drawings, we actually also visited Hancock, Shaker Village, early on in our research, and looked at some of these same gift drawings that are in the exhibition and that Maria showed us in her talk, in their talk. And we were really struck by the symmetry many of these drawings. They were extremely symmetrical, and that's one of the reasons that we wanted to make this this video have this mirrored form. The other thing is the colors that are used in the dancers' costumes are also the colors that are used in Shaker architecture to denote the different functions of different buildings. Okay, next slide, please.
Okay, so yeah, this you can see Maria also referenced this and like how we structured the performance and like the relationship to each other, the performers, the kind of starting outside and then the processional coming inside. And I believe in like learning through structure to allow the freedom. So by creating patterns and creating repetition and creating structure, then you can go into this more free like a transcendent state. And so how do we start with a very structured idea and move through the day, and what is the effects of the progression of the day on the performers? And I think you saw in the previous slide, we kind of had some very, like we would do anywhere between 5 to 7 minutes durational movement sequences. And the camera would move throughout the room in a very structured way. And I invited the dancers to also bring in movement phrases to kind of have this communal experience. And then I would kind of be like, all right, who's ready? John, are you ready for your movement sequence? And he would share, and then we would all learn it. And then we would do it for a period of time and kind of sequence that throughout the day. And audience members would come in 3 times throughout the day to witness. And they are also in the video. They make an appearance in the video. And through that, then we moved into a much more improvisational structure and score for the end, where each person could kind of move through their own movement and desire, and then relate to this back into the space, and how this kind of idea of the energy of that room contains the history of those moving bodies and that kind of heightened spiritual relationship, and how can we then go and connect to the room itself through the physical body, and yeah, find places within the spirits within that connection there.
So we're going to show you now a clip that's from towards the end of the video, which is also from like much later in the day, when you'll see a difference in the way the dancer's physicality is showing up at this point in the day. Next slide, please. I'm going to read you a little bit more of the text now as well. So we received gifts of freedom and simplicity, life and zeal, balls of love and blessing, sparks of holy fire, palms of victory, staves of strength, crowns of love, mantles and robes of wisdom, chains of union, and numerous other gifts of a similar kind, calculated to strengthen our souls and fill us with life, which continued to flow almost incessantly throughout the meeting. Sometimes when an individual would receive a bush or other emblem filled with quickening power of holy fire, we would all unite and shake heartily. A great many were wrought upon by an irresistible power, which caused the assembly to shake and reel and toss like the trees of the forest when shaken with the wind. Next slide, please. Um,
yeah. So this
yeah,
is
go
a
ahead,
little bit
Erin.
of oh, sorry.
No, no.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead,
Um,
go ahead.
uh, so this you can see some of the references to the drawings and the physicality. I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. What I have down here.
Hmm.
Um, mm,
You want me to jump in?
yeah, please, really quick.
Okay, so I'll say one of the things that we really noticed when we first did a research visit to the village, and then when we were kind of spending time in the space the day before we actually shot in there with the dancers, was that it has Gothic style truss architecture, so it's extremely resonant. Essentially, the whole building is a machine for making a joyful noise, right? Like when one hand claps, it sounds like 10 hands clapping. When one foot stomps, it sounds like 10 feet stomping. And that, just felt to us so important. And I think brought so much to the way that we inhabited the space and the way that everyone responded to being in the space and the movements that they were then moved to make, being in the space. It was like responding to that specific resonance. It felt like, yeah, we were evoking a kind of feeling, and we were not recreating what had been done there in the past, but recreating a feeling that had been evoked there in the past because of actually trying to make the same kind of music from the building that had been made there before, just from the movement of the bodies. That was one thing I wanted to say. And then, yeah, I think the other is just about being there for the whole duration of the day. And this idea, I think that has come up in other projects we've made with trained dancers before, of actually trying to push them to the point where like the training falls out of the body. And you actually exhaust the body to the point where they can't hold the training in it anymore, and they kind of it unlearns all of that posture, that ballet posture, or that like contemporary like expressionism, right? Like that hyperextension, that contemporary hyperextension, and instead it's just the body is just there, and the body just does like what it has to do to get through the next moment and the next moment and the next moment. Yeah, and I think we're really interested in what happens at that point when the body is that exhausted and enters that kind of transcendent state. Yeah.
And that'll like go into when I was saying like not recreating, but taking from other practices that I've been exploring for the last 20 years, and Qigong especially, in this idea of like when they're talking about shaking, and historically in movement practices, shaking is done as a meditation in order to like soften the organs, to soften the nervous system, to kind of release the tension in the muscles. And then so if you do this for longer periods of time, what can happen? And that is like introducing some of these more kind of meditation practices into the movement scores, so that the dancers and performers also had something to pull upon when the structure started breaking down. Those movements could kind of inform the trajectory of the space of freedom, and you can see them reoccurring and re-entering into the space, and then reintroducing through kind of just like spoken direction in the moment. Okay, now we'll make a circle. Now we'll kind of lay down on the ground, like just kind of really going in the moment through kind of a structured improvisation to arrive at this sense of collection. And I really feel that the best kind of compliment we got from this work so far, beyond any review or anything like that, is that the performers actually really enjoyed being a part of the process and felt that they left with something very meaningful from the experience. And so like the work was made from the experience.
Yeah. All right. Next slide, please. And yeah, just to wrap it up, this is how the text ends, which is much praise was danced and sung that day. And towards the conclusion, we received from Holy Mother Wisdom, each one a drop of her pure love. some of those that were there that day say it was one of the liveliest meetings they were ever in. So thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Mariam. So next we'll hear from Cauleen Smith. Cauleen Smith is a filmmaker and artist whose interdisciplinary work expands from histories and practices of experimental film, including structuralism, third world cinema, and science fiction. In addition to appearing in many group exhibitions, she has also had solo exhibitions at the Whitney Museum of American Art, Mass MoCA, Philadelphia's Institute of Contemporary Art, and LA's Museum of Contemporary Art, among others. She was also included in the Whitney Biennial in 2017. Okay, over to you, Cauleen.
Hi, everyone. Wow, it's just been such a delight to listen to you talk about your work. So inspiring. You can go to the first slide, please. I kind of entered into the Shakers a little bit differently, mainly just curiosity. I stumbled on some of the drawings and was really obsessed with them. But I didn't have a way of engaging them. It didn't really intersect with my areas of research, or so I believed. I visited when I was a resident at Skowhegan. I visited for I was a participant at camper, and I got a bunch of us to get in a van and go visit the compound there. And this was in 2007. So they would just open the drawers and those leaf drawings were just like set out before you. And it seemed like it really imprinted me. I kept thinking about them. And I noticed that on these drawings, I could read about what everything meant. Like there are scholars who can break down all of the elements except for that object there. They tend to skip over that, the scholars, when they talk about these drawings. A lot of them they're these odd looking machines, and they're often labeled heavenly musical instruments, but there is nothing really said about them. It's like a blank spot in the drawing. A heavenly musical instrument. I became obsessed with them, and I was tracking in the drawings that I could access or find when they appeared, what they looked like. I would redraw them. I even started to think about building them, this idea of a heavenly musical instrument. And what allowed me to sort of indulge in my curiosity about the Shakers was actually Rebecca Cox Jackson, who was a free Black woman from Philadelphia, who also was a Shaker and found the Shakers to be living the true word of God. And she joined them for some period. And then she stayed associated with them, but started the first urban Shaker colony, which seems to have comprised of a membership of domestic workers in the city of Philadelphia. And she claims that God gave her the ability to read and write. She'd asked her brother and her father to teach her, but they wouldn't. But one day she was a receiver of visions. And when she came out of a kind of catatonic state, she could read and write. So she started writing everything, her dreams, her encounters, her attempts to be at evangelical spreading of the word. And the thing that really moved me about her was her deep devotion to this practice, and also an understanding that she had to leave it. The Shakers had trouble kind of recognizing the world sometimes, and one of the things that seems to have been a problem was, like some little things like the Fugitive Slave Act, which could have actually rendered people like Rebecca Cox Jackson, free people, snatched up, kidnapped, and sent into slavery. And so I think that there were these social, political conflicts with her. And I was really intrigued with the way that she reconciled those through her dreams, and the way that sound in particular appeared in her dreams, and direction, the four directions. While I'm thinking about her and her life, I'm still thinking about these musical instruments, and I still don't really know what to do with my obsession with the Shakers, their ways, the things they invented, um, their dreams, and my own, like the things that I'm interested in, which is kind of, I guess, in a simple sentence, would be sort of like the ontology of Blackness in some regard. So then can you keep going forward with the slides, if you will, please? I was invited to intersect with another spiritual woman, Annie Besant, who made these beautiful paintings that were called thought forms, that were visual manifestations of her ideas about what an emotion was shaped like. I told I met the curator and said, there's something about Sun Ra, Alice Coltrane, Thought Form, Annie Besant. To me, they're all in the same little galaxy. And she invited me to make this sculpture. I'm not a sculptor, as you can probably see. But I collaborated with a real carpenter to try and take one of those drawings and make it a thing. And taking those drawings and making the material objects made them even more strange, more wonderfully strange. I had to make decisions about what things were. I think there's one more slide of this object, which is called the mysterious. Oh, no, that's the last one. So can you go back? I'm sorry. That it's called the mysterious object at noon. And instead of a living bird, I attached sort of feathers to a membrane on the bicycle wheel instead of a spinning wheel. Everything is sort of like what is in my world, as opposed to the appropriation of like a time traveling into the world of the Shakers. I just wanted to understand what the machine, the heavenly musical instrument was, right? And I still don't know, even after building it. And I kind of want to build all of them. Um, because I still feel like there's something about the attempt to materialize this vision that taught me something. I don't even know what I'm learning, but I'm still curious. Anyway, I couldn't like grasp onto this. I'm making this sculpture. It's a one-off. I don't have a reason for it to exist. It no longer exists. And then I'm reading Alice Coltrane's book, Monument Eternal. You can go to the next slide. And I don't have a picture of Rebecca Cox Jackson in this presentation because I don't know if there really is a photograph of her. There are 3 images that are assigned to her. One of them could be her partner, Rebecca number 2, Rebecca Perot. One could be just another Black woman who was a Shaker. It's really unclear. And therefore, I like the idea that she could be anyone. She could have been any, and I don't need a picture of her. But there are many images of Alice Coltrane. And then there is this book, like Rebecca Cox Jackson, she wrote about her process of ascension into like a female godhead, very much like Mother Ann Lee, where she was compelled through pushing through this series of austerities that she describes in this book towards a kind of a Vedic Hindu practice that involved her music. One of the astral planes that she visited, that she describes in this book, where she leaves her body, she describes musical instruments that play themselves. She describes the way in which human bodies can involuntarily, without their knowledge, begin making sound that becomes harmonious and becomes a beautiful sound, a joyful noise. And she describes this as what she understood and perceived when she left her body and visited a particular astral plane. And in that moment, I found the connection between teenage girls in the middle of the 1800s drawing really cool pictures and all the things that I'm really interested in, and the way in which in my work I look at those things very often through sound and music. I tried to make a film that strung a lot of these ideas together. The main things that I was learning from Rebecca Cox Jackson and her urban Shaker compound, which was documented by W.E.B. Du Bois, of all people, and Alice Coltrane, who had this gorgeous center and ashram in Calabasas, California, which I visited, and I met her students. The thing that I was, and Mother Ann Lee, actually, the thing I was learning from these women, I was desperate to sort of string it all together, to talk about the way in which these women were compelled not just to sort of liberate themselves through spirit and through this spiritual ascension, but to make space for others. And that the practice of making space for others was a crucial part of their overall practice. In Alice Coltrane's case, a part of the music. And Rebecca Cox Jackson's place, it was a part of her evangelical mission. And I wanted to talk about the actual shared space that is produced by these sort of deep beliefs and practices And so that's how I arrived at this film that I call Sojourner, which is an attempt to weave together not just those women, but also Noah Purifoy, Simon Rodia, these artists who made things that are created quite deliberately for others, not just themselves. So I think you can play that clip and then we'll almost be caught up. I really blew through that. Sorry.
Page 48. The Lord can produce sound from such non-musical entities as motors, electrical appliances, clocks, dishwashers, refrigerators, cars, airplane engines, window panes, water, trees, the wind, and from people, without their knowledge. I once listened to a great musical play on melody and rhythm during the sleep of some relatives. Their respiratory rate increased while they slept, and their out and ingoing breath became a vehicle for sound and song. 6 people sounded as if they were 100 strong. Effects of cymbals, bells, tinkling, percussion, and dialectic inflections, if the songs were of foreign origin, were clearly audible. Many of the celestial instruments can be played without the use of hands or any physical contact whatsoever. Your mind, your heart, is your only approach to them. Your thoughts open up the many avenues of sound and expression on these wonderful instruments.
So that was Alice Coltrane, a quote from her book.
What is monumental and eternal to me is to feel the Lord's play and hear the Lord's laughter or talk. Why, just this morning the Lord said to me, "Hey, Turia, at dawn, sit at the feet of action. At noon, be at the hand of might. At the eventide, be so big that sky will learn sky."
So that's the last, I don't know, 4 minutes of a film that weaves through a lot of places and actually has quotes from Rebecca Cox Jackson as well as Alice Coltrane, as well as the Combahee River Collective, and visits the Watts Towers and the Desert Museum, which you see there. And that last pose of those women there inside of Noah Purifoy's sculpture is a reenactment of a photograph of a bunch of teenage boys hanging out in the Watts Towers and in a kind of very self-conscious repose, very much aware and yet of the camera, but seemingly making an image for themselves. And so the radio and the Watts Towers, thinking of it as an antenna for the city of Los Angeles, and the radio as the material representation of this reception, and this reception being something that I really did start to think more about in a more serious way when I encountered the Shakers, and the way in which they would receive messages from all manner of ancestors and spirits. And they were incredibly promiscuous in terms of who they were open to learning from and receiving from in the most beautiful way, in a very, I would dare I say, American way. I'm still really, really I don't know, trying to learn from that as well. And I can stop talking now. We can just talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Colleen, and thank you to everyone for sharing your presentations and your artwork with us this evening. Now we're going to switch gears and bring all the artist presenters back together for our panel discussion. And I'll kick us off with a question, and of course, feel free to naturally respond to each other. And for everyone watching, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll still have time for the Q&A at the end. So since historically significant Shaker sites are so central to each of the films you shared and the work you shared today, I thought we could start our conversation there in these meaningful places. So to begin, I think this is a question for all of you, so we can just go around. Tell us about the site you chose and what drew you to this particular place, and why was it important for you to film on site there?
You may have to call us.
Okay, I was just
say
thinking
who should start.
Yeah. Well, how about, do you want to start, Mariam?
Sure.
Okay.
I can start us off. The meeting house at Pleasant Hill, specifically the meeting house, was actually recommended to me and Erin in a way. We had just finished working on a project in St. Louis, which is actually where Erin is from. And the curator we worked with at the St. Louis Art Museum, Eric Lutz, actually wrote his master's thesis on Shaker gift drawings and is, I would say, a little bit obsessed with the meeting house at Pleasant Hill. He thinks it's the most beautiful Shaker meeting house in America. And he, having worked with us, knows that all of our work is site responsive. It's very much about place, and a lot of it is about architecture. And he said to us as we were wrapping up the St. Louis project, you should go and visit this meeting house in Kentucky. I think you would really, really like it and could make something really interesting there. And so we did take him up on that. We went and visited Pleasant Hill, and we loved the meeting house. We were like, this meeting house is incredible. It's such a beautiful resonant space, as I mentioned earlier. And we managed to get in there right before they renovated it. We had to actually move up the filming by, I think, 3 or 4 months to get in there before they renovated it, and in a way kind of took away some of the things that we loved the most about it, which were the signs of its use and its age and all the wear on the building. Yeah, all of that actually they actually smoothed it all out right after we finished filming, which is a pity. But yeah, that's how that happened.
And I can follow up just because of working with Mariam at that site. I want to say that with Colleen's piece, the idea of transmission is also very much resonates with me in terms of like how are we transmitters, right? How are we receivers and transmitters? And I think through sight, we can also, it's like an alignment situation. How do we align to be the transmitter or a receiver or an offer? And through that site, because there was so much transmission happening there, the question of can we tap into some of that frequency in which that was generated historically there, through song and dance in particular often. And they also, beyond the meeting house, like the meeting house was a container for that, that transmission, right? A lot of the prayers and the songs and the dance and the resonance, like it contains that, and vibrationally can it hold that space to allow for other people to tap into it. And there was a subsequent spot on the grounds that was an outside, that like when we were doing our research, which was an outside portal place. And so that was where the relaxed rules would happen, and there would have like meetings there. The description of it was like it really interesting, where like rules were relaxed and like there was kind of more like just more dangerous meetings, like ceremony almost, right, at outside. And because they were notorious for not drinking, and like so we're like, what is that? Like were they passing the bottle around? Was like what was happening in that space. But this idea of portals. And so having an outdoor and an indoor space in which these kind of transmissions could happen, these connections to spirit, relationships to their community, relationships to inviting other people into the community. Yeah, and so that's why I think also in particular that location, the meeting house was preserved and accessible for us, and that location of the duality of this outside portal, inside meeting house portal, for sure.
Yeah, I feel like that's a good transition to Cauleen if you want to speak to this topic too.
Yeah, when I learned that Rebecca Cox Jackson had stayed at the Watervliet Troy site, and then I happened to be teaching at Bard, and which is not far, and it's unbelievable luck because if you're living on the West Coast, it's not that easy to just sort of like troll around the Northeast coast. And so I didn't have a plan yet. I didn't know how I would make a film, but I often visit sites with my Bolex camera and I use it to document the space, just to study it. It's more effective than my iPhone because I just take too many pictures with my iPhone, but the film is expensive. And so I decide when I get it back, it teaches me what imprinted on me. So I just went there. I drove there, rented a car, drove there, and spent the day wandering through all of the buildings, in particular the gardens, the chicken coops, turkey coops, and their dance hall where they had a giant picture of one of the Rebeccas. I'm not sure which, on display. And then the volunteer, they had lots of really sweet volunteers, was telling me stories about her, which were actually not correct. And I think in that moment of visiting is when I realized that I really did have to do some work with her and with her life. Even I'm not a documentary, I don't make fact-based work. But I needed to sort of like propose that she had a voice of her own that you could actually just listen to if you wanted to. Yeah.
And Maria, do you want to chime in on your relationship, your work's relationship to the historic site that you worked in?
Yeah, gosh, site has played such a role in the kind of like epic roller coaster of like these kind of inner projects, because I mentioned they were originally going to be like kind of sewing together different sites. And I didn't talk about it in this talk. I'm probably going to talk about, I might teach a class this winter through morbid anatomy about shakers, and I'll probably go more into this, but I spend a lot of time on the sites and researching the sites of that are off the campus of like what I think probably Erin was referring to, the sort of like holy mountains, dancing grounds, feast grounds. In some cases, have found them for the Shaker museums. So I do a lot of the like spirit work at those sites, but then the actual like Shaker villages. I mean, it's funny with the film. It's like we actually ended up filming in the least ideal site only because, well, first of all, our cinema cave is like 7 feet tall and he was taller than the room. And we're like trying to shoot this kind of aerial movement and making this drawing. I mean, we were always planning to do an installation in that Shaker office, but it was kind of, it was because of the circumstances with COVID and different things around that we ended up shooting a film in there. But I kind of love that because I often think about the Shakers sort of success and longevity as being kind of dependent on both their adaptability and their visionary, like organized way. And so I Fruitlands is technically where the Shaker office is technically like a transcendental utopian site where they tried to have like a utopian farm there. And then Claire Sears bought the land. She was close friends with the Shakers. They actually gave her one of their offices when the harvest closed. And then I found these beehives like in the Hancock Shaker Village attic. Like they didn't know what they were. And I was like, oh, those are totally beehives, and brought them. So I was talking with my partner earlier about how it's almost like this Frankenstein utopia or something. And I actually don't usually like use the utopian framework with the Shakers because I really honor that they see what they're doing as heaven on earth. And I like that that also honors the earth, you know, the heavens and the earth. Um, so, because I think sometimes utopia can be like, you know, too clean, also runs the risk of being white supremacist. So I actually really appreciate that this sort of imperfect site became this kind of perfect place to kind of cobble together all of these adaptive parts of the film. And even like we tried to reschedule the different times all on full moons because there's a really significant part of the film where the full moon light comes in. We ended up having to film not on a full moon, and Gabe like manufactured a moon light out the window. I mean, there's just so many things that I think contributed, and we ended up just getting perfect weather, you know, on like a day in late November, and everything looked so golden. So I think, yeah, it's just like the imperfect site became the perfect site. It is what it is, and that's the magic that was made. So
Thank you. Yeah, thank you all for going a little deeper and sharing what drew you to these spaces. I think slide-wise, maybe we look through some of the images we had collected from the exhibition, and then we'll go into one more question for the group. Matilda, yeah, so we have a few more. For those of you who are from afar, maybe haven't seen the show, these are some images we see that are on view, and definitely if you are local and haven't seen, worth a look. So speaking to the interior and exterior space and the labors of the Shakers, we have this one, and some chair making and basketry in action. We could look up, just go through quick. Yeah, we've seen some of these speaking to the communal aspect and dance and prayer through movement. We can look at another one, and these have gotten some love today, the sacred sheets. Definitely a favorite of mine too. We can see the next one. And also got some looks of these in Maria's piece, the gift drawings, which I think is a good segue into one more question here. And I have so much I want to talk to you all about, but I'm deciding which one to go with here. But I guess we've done the last question, we were looking back into history and place. So I think for the last one to pose through the group, we'll be looking forward in time of what you all have spent so much time researching and making art based on Shaker gift drawings, Shaker community life, spiritual practices. So as a final reflection, I'd love to hear from each of you tonight on this. in a world that right now that can feel not so utopian at times. What's one idea or something you've learned from your research, one idea from the Shakers' lifestyle and culture and the things that they make that particularly inspires you and feels like it could open up possibilities for us today? So I will call, unless someone is eager to jump in, I guess I'll tap. Cauleen, would you wanna? Yes, your mic is
Yeah, sure.
unmuted.
I mean, I'm glad you circled back to Utopia because that's what I wanted to jump on when piggyback Maria's offering, which is that the reason that I got so enthralled with the Shakers as well as Alice Coltrane and others is because they they did they did make very intentional utopian projects. And when I started looking at this, there was a period in the art community where utopian was like poo-pooed. It was like, it's not possible, it's not a thing. Why are you even bothering? And my response to that has always been like, because like what could be worse than this? Even attempting, even attempting to build like a better world is and failing is better than this. And these people actually succeeded. They actually did it. They actually did something that made space for people for whom there is no room or no other place. They actually related to their world, the planet, other living beings in ways that like instituted regard as instead of extraction or exploitation. They actually practiced and struggled to practice with ethics and care and love. They did it. It's not a pipe dream. Utopia is real. And the Shakers are proof of that.
Beautiful. Thank you, Colleen. I guess everyone else, if you have like 30 seconds, let's have a snappy, just so we could get, I think there's just like one or two audience Q&A. So Maria, do you want to take the mic?
Yeah, I feel like I'll piggyback back up of Colleen. Yeah, I think a big piece of that too is like, you know, the Shakers are very popular, and we idealize them and love them now, but they took huge risks and got their asses kicked and were brutalized and punished and not accepted and extremely radical. And I mean that's partially why they actually started to have the communities separate from the world was from their own safety. So this didn't come easily. There were major challenges. They took major risks. They stood up for something different. And I have like more stuff I kind of feel like saying about their celibacy and my framework of queerness, but for another time. Thanks.
Great, thanks.
I can piggyback on that. I mean, I think the thing that has always struck me the most strongly about the Shakers is their radicalism, which I don't think is emphasized enough. And especially the fact that they are like the only true communists in the sense that they're the only ones who actually broke down heteronormative family structures, which is the true communist project that nobody else has ever actually lived for as long as they did. It is why they died out, but like, they actually really did it. And how can you live in a community of true equality without breaking down those structures? Yeah. So.
And I will just then say, like, following that, like, the idea of like work and labor and sense of connection to the land and to materiality with like a kind of grace that they like it wasn't a burden. They, with like song, like working as the gods with God's hands to like serve, right? And connect and then have this so that to me, like when I feel like, oh God, I have to do this or I feel stressed about that, and like how do you approach work or this idea of labor with love and joy and service and connection, so that kind of to connect in and offer up, that those ideas feel very relevant to me.
Please, can I just say one more thing to expand what Mariam was saying about them dying out? There's some evidence that they took in children, unwanted children, abandoned children. And there's some evidence that the laws that started to encroach on that, laws about like who could take care of children, instituting children's homes instead of letting people drop off a child they couldn't care for, the Shakers. There's some instances of that is what contributed to their downfall, not the celibacy. Just saying, it's important to take care, like look at the little local laws.
That's part of my sort of understanding of the trajectory as well. I mean, there's a lot of, I've also heard the Shakers say like the world changed around us in a way that, we could not exist in the same way. Of course, there are still two living, which I think is important as well.
And I want to keep, I really want to keep going on this. Thank you all so much. Matilda's popped back up on the screen, so I will thank you to everyone here and hand it back over to Matilda to take us home.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for sharing all these thoughts and also for being so full of spirit while we were encountering so many and major technical difficulties. So thank you so much. I feel like the room was full of spirit, not on our side, but in the shared space on Zoom. So that's really really great. And also it was great to have you really show us how you connect to the radicalism of the Shaker. And so I don't see many questions, but I have a question, and I think we will end on that. One from Shannon Matthias. I hope I said the name correctly. But so there's a question. Is there any evidence that the Shakers were flexible in their quotidian practices? They seem extremely disciplined and structured. And I was thinking maybe we could take that question also to expand a little bit more on one point that I think is very important in all your presentation and your project is these points of the oscillation between the spiritual and secular life, and also the discipline and the control, inspiration and control that is very strong in the practice. And I was wondering if you could talk about this point of oscillation in your own work, how you also take spiritual practice, inspiration in relation to your own control as a maker. So how you connect to this form of spirituality in your own practice. So I guess we have two questions to end on. And I know that Maria wanted to respond to Shannon, so maybe you can start.
I think the others would probably have things to say about this as well, but when you look through the like manuscripts and journals and diaries, there's they'll be like, oh, there was a comet, oh, there was an eclipse, and then they're like, we decided not to drink coffee anymore, or there's just all these different notes that are all kind of mixed in there. But you'll see, I'm of the mind that there's a lot of variety and diversity among all the different Shakers, not only from like time period to time period, but village to village. And like I see little notes like, we decided to, they wouldn't say outlaw, but like stop drinking coffee in the village, except for, the elder Shakers, because how could you expect them to stop drinking coffee? There's funny little lines like that. And I could go kind of on about that, but and sometimes I even think that they even wrote something into the millennial laws that had more of a practical application, but they were able to sort of frame it as more of a theological or moral application. So I think that's just to say that I think there was a lot of variety and everything's not just so strict. And I think that adaptivity is how they continued. So.
I mean, they were constantly inventing labor-saving devices, right? There are things that they even ended up patenting and sending out into the world. So it's not that there was a rigidity in how things had to be done, right? There was always a search for, it also wasn't that like work had to be hard in order to be a gift to God, right? It wasn't about the discipline being a punishment in any way. It's always just about like, how can we do this in a way that is like service, but also pleasure. So yeah, I think there was quite a lot of flexibility.
And do you want to talk maybe about this idea of in your own practice, like this kind of balance between the two? I would be curious to learn more from that point of view of how you think about these questions in your own practice.
I can say for me, it's like there are different techniques that you learn in order to like for me in body work, there's systems and techniques and structured kind of movements, and there's precision within those movements to find alignments. And they can be like, can I find the palm of my hand to the, crown of my head, and what is the just the specific micro movement that finds that kick in, right? And learning how to tap into that through practice then will allow me to be able to sense into that central channel, which is a whole level of freedom that can happen in movement once the form falls away. So I'm very much interested in how to find the precision in form in certain practices in order to find a release and a freedom in improvisation. And so even making our work, I tried to structure it in such a way that there was very specific movements that we were doing, so that by the end, when the dancers were invited to do their own dance, they had they didn't have to think about it anymore. They could feel into that kind of those senses of connection. Because if you practice the connection repeatedly, then your body knows it, and then you can find a kind of freedom. And so that's, I guess, my answer to that.
Amazing. Anyone would like to add anything to that, or shall we end on that note?
I would love to hear Maria talk about some of those things, because it feels like it's right there in the work.
Oh, thank you so much. I was like trying to re-find the exact question in my mind, but I think this will speak to it. But I I feel like so many people like come to the Shakers because it's like their furniture, their craft, they're so productive and all of these things. And I actually think so many people shy away from their spirituality. And I do understand part of that is out of respect for letting them define their own spiritual, which I agree with. But um, it's like I feel like we talk about belief so much, and then still people are so scared to like maybe admit that they really believe. Like I kind of, like I said, I stepped out of the broom closet, which included the sort of intuition and I think this stuff is real. I really believe we speak to spirits. I really believe that, in animism and that objects are imbued with spirit. And I think that a lot of people are waking up to that. And there's some hammers coming down on those of us who have woken up to that. But it's really important to like just kind of if you feel aligned with those things to really speak to it and like form these networks and communities of actual like believers and practitioners spiritual of the intuitive practices. Yeah, I don't know, I hope I did kind of answer the question. I just wanted to say that, I guess. Thank you, Colleen, and I'd love to hear what you have to say as well.
I mean, I'm a heathen, and I just religion doesn't take, but spirit always does. So like I just learned from anybody who has like a really robust spiritual practice. I respect it immensely, even though I guess too feral to actually practice it.
I love that. That's great.